What is up, everybody? Happy Friday night. Some big Buffalo Bills news today dropped at the stadium. So we're doing an impromptu Shout Bills podcast. A couple more signings, but we're not going to get into too much of that today. We'll save that for another day. Some big news today. I'm joined by Sal Maiorana from the Democrat and Chronicle in Rochester. He is the co-host of the Bleav in Bills podcast. Sal, what's up, my friend? How are you?
I'm good. I was out to dinner with my wife and looked at my phone and said, "Oh, that was a bad day not to go to Buffalo." I hadn't planned on going. I told our buddy Skursky, I said, "I'm probably not coming back Friday, so just get me on the transcript." He said, "We got you covered, buddy." Little did I know that there was going to be breaking news happening.
I know. Well, what's funny about this, people ask me this all the time. We have this in common. You work at the Rochester paper. I work for the Syracuse Post-Standard. And a lot of times people ask me, man, do you drive back and forth from Syracuse all the time? I'm like, no, I'm based in Buffalo, but you do driving back and forth from Rochester. So it's a challenge.
Do. Yeah. I mean, I knew that Bean was probably going to speak today, but I've had enough. It was a long week. So I told my guys over there, you and Skursky, take care of me. But no, I did not expect this to happen. And what bugs me is, damn well, they knew about this yesterday, which is probably why they didn't send Bean out there to talk. And Ogunjobi was one of the guys who didn't talk yesterday. Although, did he get to town today? Was he not in town yesterday?
No, he was yesterday. That's when they found out.
Okay.
So I'm sure
there you go.
They were working through a lot of this. I mean, that's what Brandon kind of illuminated today, that a lot of this came to the forefront yesterday, kind of going through their options, figuring things out. We'll get to that in a second, but let's set all of this up for people that are just trying to get up to speed on all of this. So the Bills have two players that they just signed as free agents, Michael Hoecht from the Rams, and then Larry Ogunjobi from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, both of these guys in different times of the offseason have popped for positive performance enhancing drugs tests and are facing 6-game suspensions. Now, all accounts, we talked to them both today, it doesn't appear that either of them are appealing them. They are taking responsibility for whatever it was in their body, different circumstances. We'll get to that in a second. The Bills knew about Hoecht. So when they were pursuing him in free agency, this is something that his representatives were told to be upfront with teams that they were talking to. And so the Bills went into this like, not ideal. We'd like to have you for the first 6 games, but we like you. We're going to continue to pursue this. They knew about this. And it just so happens, in terms of bad luck, Larry Ogunjobi finds out, I believe a day or two. He didn't have the exact time frame before he was coming to Buffalo to sign his deal, which was yesterday, that he had also failed a performance enhancing drug test. And so now he is also facing the same 6-game suspension. Now, when this happened, Brandon Beane said that there was some consideration about what the Bills are going to do here, because in an ideal world, they don't want to go into the season with 2 defensive linemen that they're going to count on to be out for 6 games consecutively at the same time. The problem was, at this point, yesterday, Thursday, you're basically 3 days into free agency. I know the tampering period started on Monday, but there weren't a lot of defensive tackles left on the market. Ogunjobi goes back to Bean's been known about him back from his Carolina days. The big selling point for him is that his best season came in Cincinnati as part of a 4-3 scheme. Hasn't been as good in Pittsburgh. They play a 3-4. This obviously changed the math a little bit. They talked it through. He is the Steelers nominee for Walter Payton Man of the Year last year. So they did the character background. They think this is just an error. And there's a lot of these things that go on. I mean, these guys are taking a lot of supplements in the offseason. Hoecht basically said that he had a specific trainer that he's worked with for the last couple of years. Early on in their relationship, everything went through like a private nurse to make sure that everything that he put in his body, it checked out. And as the years went on, he wasn't as vigilant in checking on every single supplement that his trainer was giving him. And that's what he talked about. But the Bills feel comfortable with where they're at. With Ogunjobi, it's a little bit different because of where they found it. What's your first reaction to this? Because the big reaction online was people pretty hot with Brandon Beane right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, defensive tackle, we knew this going into the offseason was a major priority for the Bills. So Ogunjobi, you're thinking he's going to be one of the answers. I still say they got to get one in the draft. I'm sure you agree. They need a bigger guy to be that Daquan Jones replacement. So now you get this guy on a 1-year deal. My initial thought when I saw this, Matt, was what are we bothering for here? I understand Hoecht. You've got him on he's 27 years old, versatile player, edge inside guy. You've got him on a 3-year deal. You want him around so you could live with 6 games in his first season. But Ogunjobi, you're willing to throw away a third of the season, the one season you signed the guy for. He's 31 years old, right? I mean, my first thought was, what are they bothering? Why didn't they just move on? And, they're going to draft one, I'm sure. You can't tell me there's not somebody out there that they could move on to. I'm very surprised by that. So that was my initial thought. Now, I understand your point that you made about how you probably said it offline, about how he's an injury-prone guy. So maybe resting him the first 6 weeks will be good because he'll be available late in the season, you would hope. But I don't really like the decision they're making with Ogunjobi to move forward. Hoecht I get, Ogunjobi I don't.
No, I think every reaction that's on the table right now is fair. I mean, this is a punch to the face for fans that were really excited about kind of the retooling of this defensive line. And now you're sitting there saying almost half the season, you're going to be without 2 of those really important pieces. I get all that. On the Hoecht front, I understand where Bean is coming from. This is a very versatile piece, somebody that they've been on since last year. Obviously, he was up front. I mean, we met with him today. I thought he was a very engaging, charismatic kind of guy. They like some of the off-the-field stuff, the attitude stuff that they did in terms of their due diligence. So I understand that piece of it. Reversing on Ogunjobi, listen, I wasn't over the top on this addition anyway. He's somebody that hasn't been super great the last couple of years, a former 3rd-round pick who's been fine. I mean, he had that 7 sack season playing next to DJ Reader. I think a lot of that had to do with how good DJ Reader is, and we could talk about that at a different time. But I do understand what Bean is saying, not wanting to pivot off of this, because he's just another piece that they're hoping to throw into this collection of pieces that's going to mean something down the stretch. And who knows, Ogunjobi, even at $8 million, depending on what they do in the draft, might not even factor into things late in the season, depending on how things go in the draft. I maintain when they signed Ogunjobi, Hoecht, and even Joey Bosa, I know everybody's super excited about his arrival. I don't think any of those 3 change the math on what you're going to do in the draft in a very talented defensive tackle and edge class. You still have to attack. That's what's made the Eagles and the Chiefs so good for so long, is even as they supplement with a lot of these free agent acquisitions, they still go in and find talent in the draft that are going to be on those cost-controlled contracts for a couple of years and be able to develop these players. I'm still, if I'm Brandon Beane, going into this draft with a priority on defensive tackle and edge rusher.
You're absolutely right. And look, I think the first 3 picks they make, Matt, have to be on the defense. The first round pick, I really Bleav, they need a cornerback. I mean, Dane Jackson, I understand why they brought him back. I'm not quite sure why they're running it back with Dane Jackson, even as a depth issue. But they need to strike for a cornerback, and it might even take trading up to get a good one because they're barren there. They really are. But those other 2 picks, they've got to be on the defensive line, right? I mean, defensive tackle to me, if it isn't cornerback in the first round, it's got to be a D tackle. And then edge rusher, you've got Bosa for the year. You've re-upped with Russo. You're going to get Hoecht back eventually. You're okay. Epinesa is still there. You could wait on the edge rusher, maybe even to the second day, late in that second round pick. But defensive tackle has got to be a priority. And like I said, with Ogunjobi, he's 305 pounds. And he has not played well for the Steelers. Again, we talk about PFF all the time. And do you Bleav it or don't you Bleav it? But you can at least use their grading as some context for what's happening. And you pointed out that he has played in the 3-4, probably not a perfect fit for him. But I was looking for, Delvin Tomlinson or someone like that, 330-pound guy to put in there and then draft a big guy too. There's no reason why you can't bring in 2 330-pound tackles. Ogunjobi, from the moment they signed him, I wasn't quite sure why. And now, come to find out, I really have questions about why they're even going to bother moving forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest overarching issues to have with this regime has been their inability to really figure out the defensive line and specifically tackle, because the real big investment they've made, their number 9 overall pick Ed Oliver, you want to talk about a player that's just been as hot and cold as you can find in the league. And then you see a story like Poona Ford, who comes in here, gets a lot of buzz when they signed him as like a latent free agency addition, never sees the field, ends up going elsewhere, has a big season in LA this year, and then signs a big 3-year contract. And you're sitting there wondering, what was the disconnect to go and find that guy? So here's my other question. If they go out and they pay Dalvin Tomlinson, are they going to be able to utilize him? Are they going to be able to play him in the right way? And the same question remains for a lot of these other guys. I know Von Miller was hurt, and you got to kind of throw him out when you're evaluating, but a lot of the moves they made on the defensive line over the years, you go back to Mario Addison, bringing in Quentin Jefferson this year, bringing in Quentin Jefferson the first time, it was the same kind of thing. Everybody talked about him being this, under the radar guy that can give you production in a new role. He was invisible. Tim Settle, invisible. He goes and has a bunch of sacks in Houston. It's been player after player, and that's my biggest concern is how do they figure out this defensive line when it feels like a lot of the swings they've made over the years, they just haven't connected.
You're right. It's been their biggest weakness. This regime's biggest weakness has been identifying talented defensive linemen, whether it's been the draft or it's been free agency. They have not had too many hits. We would assume that Rousseau is probably going to be a hit. But really, who else? Ed Oliver, like you said, very inconsistent, maddening player. So, yeah, it has been a problem. They've got to figure it out, Matt. And I like the way he was taking swings in free agency. They came out knowing this was going to be a problem they had to address, and they went out and did it. But we'll see. I don't. The Ogunjobi thing really has my mind twisted. And like I said, I wasn't sure about him before this even happened today. So that, what this is going to do? This is going to set up Jordan Phillips for his 15th return to Buffalo. They'll bring him in to start the season, and then they'll see where they are. But I don't know. It's a problem they got to figure out.
The math doesn't math for me, because to me, Ogunjobi is like your Dwayne Carter insurance plan at almost $9 million.
By the way, I really question him too. He showed me nothing. But
that's why they're going out and maybe overpaying for Ogunjobi, I think, to have somebody that you could count on to play behind Ed Oliver. And oh, by the way, at One Tech, you're still sitting here, and the only guy that's sitting there is going to be 34-year-old Daquan Jones, who took a step back last year. So now One Technique, defensive tackle, the space eater, the big-bodied defensive tackle, there were a couple out there in free agency. They didn't land any of them. You got to find that in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. The Poona Ford thing, to go back to that too, that is baffling. We last year, I'm sure we discussed this. Like, what happened to that guy? He was a good player. Seattle, I think, right? Didn't he start with Seattle, right?
No, Poona Ford came up. Yeah, Seattle. You're right, Seattle.
He was a good player there. And I'm thinking that's a nice, I remember writing about it in training camp, what a nice under-the-radar signing that was going to be. That dude went into hiding within 3 weeks of the season starting. I'll never know what the disconnect was there. And then, like you said, he goes out and plays so well, and now he's got a nice contract. What did he weigh? He was about 320, right? He was
he was like a 300.
He was not even. He was a short guy.
Yep.
He was a short guy, but he had some girth to him too. So yeah, that is their number one weakness. They have whiffed at that position.
Yeah, he was a 311-pound guy, 5'11". But again, same thing. All right, I want to get to a couple more things on this. Before I do, we got a couple super chats. Bryce is in the comments. Welcome in, Bryce. My God, low-key hilarious about this happening. It is a crazy thing, by the way. Like, to sit there at Brandon Beane. And listen, I will say, evaluating when this came up in the press conference, as he was kind of talking this through, he got a little bit of red-faced. I mean, there's a little bit of egg on his face, having to admit that two of your big time additions are not going to be available for the first 6 games in this wacky kind of scenario. It can't be good internally. I'm not going to give him as much heat on it as I think a lot of fans are. We'll get to that in a second, but come on, are we trying to win a Super Bowl? And you're signing PED heads. Like, why sign them? Waste of money. And that's a good question. Like, does that change the math for you if you're Brandon Beane at all? Like, if somebody paused for PEDs, and I know they both gave excuses for it, and there were circumstances. And listen, I worked in the UFC before this, so I've dealt with performance enhancing drugs and the things that people talk about when they do pop for them and all those kinds of things. Does that change the math for you if you're Brandon Beane on these guys at all? Just from like, all right, if they were taking PEDs, whether they knew it or not, are you getting the same version of the player?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question to ask. And I got to say, Ogunjobi, he's taking the wrong kind, man, because I don't think he played very well the last couple of years. Hoecht, I think, I watched enough, tape of Hoecht now after they signed him. I like what I see in that guy. That's a hell of an athlete they've got there. Now, I don't know. Were the PEDs part of it? Maybe a tiny bit. Who knows how it really matters to a guy. But I don't think it would change the math on whether you wanted to go after Hoecht for sure. I think they probably should have pursued him. Ogunjobi, it would have changed the math for me. But, they didn't know. They got hoodwinked here, Matt. It looks like they got hoodwinked.
All right, another super chat here from Carl Tommen. The Bills must prioritize defensive tackle Kenneth Grant in the draft now. We were both at the combine a couple of weeks ago. I did my first mock draft after that, and I did have the Bills trading up to get Kenneth Grant. To me, what are your thoughts on this while I have you on the show? Because, to me, Brandon Beane always talks about not being able to get up far enough for certain guys, right? Difference makers. Yeah. But in my opinion, because you can't go out, excuse me, that's my dryer. Sorry about that. I'll have to turn that off in a second. Because you can't go out and spend all this money on the elite players at the position, the Trey Hendrickson, the Myles Garrett, all these kinds of guys, you got to find a way to get him in the draft. And whether that means trading, I mean, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. They knew they wanted Patrick Mahomes. They went up from 27 to 10 to get him. Sometimes you have to be aggressive to go get that difference making player. If you think that's Grant, and by all accounts, people are saying that he could be the difference maker at defensive tackle, the perfect combination partner to Ed Oliver. Do you do it and just get aggressive and get the guy that you want, even if it takes a trade up into the top 10?
Absolutely. I don't know if I go top 10. I don't think Grant is going to be a top 10 guy, but all the projections seem to be in that 10 to 20 range would probably be the sweet spot for him. They should definitely explore it. I mean, who knows who they like though, Matt? I mean, you and I can sit here and be at the combine and Grant looked great at Michigan and all that stuff, tested pretty well. We don't know. They do generally know more than we do when it comes to scouting players. So if they like him enough where they would take him at 30, like they always say, right? If you like a guy at 30, then take him or go up and get him. If you were going to pick him at 30, you might as well go up and get him at 20. So I think the Bills, if they do like that guy, should try to do it. They should do the same thing with a cornerback too, Matt. If there's a cornerback, because they're really, from what you can, I haven't done a whole lot of work on the draft yet, but it doesn't seem to be many first-round talents, right? In the cornerback position. Will Johnson is, after Travis Hunter, Will Johnson, right, is the next guy that everyone thinks. Yep. There's not really, maybe one other guy is considered a top first-round guy. So maybe if there's someone they're absolutely in love with at corner, you would make that move too. But either way, if there's a player they covet at a position they really need, those two in particular, absolutely I'd go up. Find somebody, find a trade, send a player. You've got 10 picks, dump some of these picks, make the numbers work to go do it.
All right. So
and the other thing too is this is a roster. How many rookies are they going to be able to roster on this team? Right. They're not going to make 10 picks anyway. So go spend some of your draft capital to get one guy who might really be a difference maker.
I got a Dane Jackson take. I was going to save it. I will throw it in here though, because you brought up cornerback. I'd have preferred them spend 2 day 3 picks looking for the next Dane Jackson as a floor, or maybe the next Christian Benford, right? As opposed to running it back with Jackson. Because what I think, and you alluded this earlier in the show, what I think bringing back Jackson does is it gives you a guy that you trust, but it also gives you it lulls you into a sense of security because you feel like you could put that guy out there and he's going to compete for the job because he always competes for the job and you love him in practice and he brings it every day. But I almost wish they remove that layer of security and force themselves into a spot. Let's go find the next Benford. And at worst, I think we've shown a pretty good track record, whether it be DeMar Hamlin, Levi Wallace, Dane Jackson, whoever ends up being even the guy that they didn't end up keeping because they had to release him, Alex Austin. He went on and he was starting games in New England.
Dane Jackson, that made no sense to me. Look, I understand you're comfortable with him. He knows the system. But you know what you're getting with Dane Jackson? A mediocrity. That's what you're getting. Why are you settling for mediocrity? Because he knows the system and you know him. Who cares? Go find somebody who might bring a different skill set to the team. Why run it back with a defense, Matt? In large part, they're running it back with a defense that's failed 5 years in a row in the elimination game in the postseason. Why are you bringing these guys back for? It didn't work with Dane Jackson the first time around. I would absolutely draft one, maybe two cornerbacks. Daquan Hardy, give the kid a chance. I don't know. Who knows? He's a 6th-round pick. He probably isn't any good, but you've already got him on the team. Give him an opportunity to do something at really low cost. What are you paying Dane Jackson for? It wasn't a lot of money, but still, it's some money. So I didn't get that one either. Sometimes these guys, I know they fall in love with their guys, but come on, dude. We don't need to keep running it back with some of these guys.
Deanna over on YouTube, one of our YouTube members, says such a sad case. It's crazy is all get out. I agree. And here's a couple of like parameters to all this, because people have been asking me about this. Oh my gosh, can they practice? Can they be a part of mini camp, training camp, preseason? Yes, they are going to be full-fledged Buffalo Bills, Ogunjobi and Hoecht, all the way up until week 1. Once week 1 starts, the suspension kicks in and they're unable to be in the facility for 4 weeks. It's a 6-week suspension. Once those 4 weeks are done, for week 5 of the NFL season, they can return to the facility and I believe be around meetings. I don't know if they're allowed to practice, but they can be back in the facility for 2 more weeks, all the way up until week 7 when they can make their debut. That's the first piece of this. The other big question I've gotten is there any salary cap ramifications? There are. It doesn't impact anything right now, but Brandon Beane said that as they get into the season and once they come off the roster, there'll be some reconciliations as they kind of miss games where they'll see some salary cap help. I can't imagine it's going to be very much or substantial enough to mean a significant move to happen because of it. But yeah, there will be some slight salary cap ramifications. I want to get those two things out.
Yeah, and I'm a little confused, but I wasn't over there today, and I haven't looked into it. I was out there with my wife, so I'm really kind of coming into this late. So, do they not count on the salary cap at the start of the season?
They do.
Or right
they
now,
count on everything. So they're going to have to keep them. Count. Yep, they'll have to keep them on the 53-man roster, and then they come off the roster and go on the reserve suspended list for 6 weeks. And almost like going on injured reserve. And then
there's no cap relief then. There's no cap. They're stuck with these guys.
There's no cap relief until things get kind of moved around because they're not going to be, whether it's they're not getting game checks or Beane didn't go into specifics about that. And I don't know how deep or how much help they're going to get, but all being said was there will be some reconciliations that happen from their missed games.
Okay.
But in terms of the math going into this thing, no, their salary cap hit is the exact same.
Yeah, I mean it's $8 million for Larry Ogunjobi that you're stuck with now when you could have just moved on from him yesterday when this happened. We're going to question that move until he shows up and can actually get on the field and play and see what he can do. I don't like it, Matt. This is a bad start to their free agency having this happen to them. And at the same position group too. That's brutal.
No, listen, when you get to week 1, it's going to be a problem trying to figure out where guys are going to go, especially knowing how hesitant Sean McDermott has been to play young players. So they're not probably going to be very active. I mean, you're going to see the Jordan Phillips of the world, I would imagine, get back on the roster. And honestly, of all the defensive linemen to consider bringing back, Jordan Phillips probably left the best taste in anybody's mouth with the way he played against the Chiefs in that final game.
He did. He played. He actually wasn't terrible at the end of the year. I mean, I thought Quentin Jefferson did really nothing. Did you even? Right. Austin Johnson, I never noticed him. Jordan Phillips, you did notice occasionally, but it's just a running joke with me that I'm just tired of Mr. Rah-Rah, get the crowd up. You know what I mean?
Well, the new thing now too is is like bringing back old Bills from the McDermott era is the new bringing on Carolina Panthers, right? They love to go back to what they know. And listen, in a lot of spots, it makes sense. I don't really ding them on a lot of these kind of moves. The Jackson one, I'm a little bit puzzled with. We got one more super chat. Let me get to this one real quick. Bryce with a couple today. Big UFC fan. Matt, watched you on it, but John Jones did and looked like lost to Jose Reyes, robbery. All right, we got to work on our penmanship here, buddy.
Yes,
Waste of
dude.
money.
Grammar.
Eli Anku, just as good, $8 million for nothing. Yeah, that's going to be the big thing now. Pushing it towards the season and what this could potentially mean. This is my final big point on all of this and why maybe I'm a little bit hesitant to completely burn Bean right now for all of this and how it happened. The Ogunjobi part, I do understand being left at a spot where you don't feel comfortable with anybody else and it not like satisfying the need. We've been here before. The Bills know how to win regular season games. If Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoecht not playing for the first 6 weeks means that the Bills are somehow in a spot where they're not in first place in the AFC East, they're probably not good enough to make a run to the Super Bowl to begin with. So that's my first part of it. And the second part of it is, listen, you want everybody to be healthy down the stretch in the playoffs. If Ogunjobi is going to be a difference maker in January, and again, I'm hesitant to say that because I've been critical of the addition to begin with. That to me is, if you're Brandon Beane, you're banking on your evaluation of him, what you know of him. He's apparently a North Carolina guy. Beane knows him he knows people at the high school he went to. He obviously scouted him when he was with the Panthers. So this is a guy that Beane's known about for a long time, and the numbers just have never worked out where they can bring him on. So it's a Beane guy that he is like banking on, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, it's a roll of the dice at this point. Like we said, I don't think either one of us likes the situation here. I would have moved on. We'll see. The draft is going to be key, though, Matt. I mean, they are going to have to address this issue in the draft. And if they do it sufficiently, then we're probably going to not even be talking about this by training camp. We won't even be worried about it if they address it in the draft properly. Or, free agency just started. There might be somebody else who gets cut somewhere who they can bring in and maybe do something with. But I don't know. They're locked into Ogunjobi, though, right? What are they? They can't get rid of him now. They signed him.
He's on the books for the $8 million guaranteed this season, which I thought was kind of like a wild contract. I have to go back and look at his other contract. I don't think he's played to that. Like, to me, he felt like a $4 or $5 million guy with incentives to get it up to $8 million. They guaranteed almost all of that 8.3, and it can go up to 10. So, 8 of it is guaranteed, 8.3, and it could go up to 10 with incentives. By the way, Bryce, who's just absolutely throwing money at the Shao podcast today, says, Sal, oh my gosh, I agree. Keep running it back with the same guys and expect different results. Like, get me some dogs, sick of these nice guys. Well, I mean, you could make an argument that a couple of suspended PED users maybe don't fall into that category. Here's the crazy part, and this is the Ogunjobi part. He was the Steelers' Walter Payton Man of the Year. I think we might have touched on this in the beginning. So I don't necessarily think this is a character thing like with him. I don't think he's out there now. But what will players do when they have been dealing with some injuries? There's so much that goes into that. But the Bills have to do their due diligence. I mean, this is a team that stood behind Von Miller over the last couple of years. And, like, we know everything that happened with that arrest 2 years ago. I still feel like it's super gross thinking back to what that police report looked like and, some of the things that have been said, the glowing things that have been said about Von Miller and the aftermath of it. But here we are.
Yeah. It's a bummer, man. It was not the news I was expecting as I was sitting at dinner tonight.
All right, final thought here. Let everybody know where they can find you. You got your own big-time podcast hitting the airwaves across all social platforms. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, DemocratandChronicle.com is where I do all my writing. And, of course, we have the Adam Benini from Channel 2 in Buffalo. We do our podcast called Bleav in Bills. It's a YouTube show, just like the Shout podcast here. So you can see it on YouTube and your podcast formats. And of course the Yankee Pinstriper, the Pinstripe People newsletter. You've got to get that. So the link to there's a subscribe link on the top of my Twitter feed. So if you're a Yankees fan, you absolutely have to get that, because as Matt knows, as a loyal subscriber, an angry Sal is always a fun Sal. And right now with the Yankees injury situation, it's been an angry Sal for the spring so far.
The Yankees newsletter is a must-have if you're a Yankees fan. And listen, this entire start to this season is going to be wild as they try to reel to figure out what they're going to do with their pitching staff. And what is it? Giancarlo is going to be out for who knows how long. It's a mess. It's a mess over there. Head over to Sal Maiorana on Twitter. Sign up for the Yankees newsletter.
All right, but thanks for having me. Appreciate it on a Friday night. Good thing I have nothing to do.
Thanks.
Right? I have nothing to do in my life. We went to dinner. We're home by 8 o'clock. So,
I love it.
That's what happens when you're 62 years old.
I know. We have to bring in everybody's favorite Buffalo media curmudgeon. What's funny about that, though, is I know Sal better than most, and he's salt of the earth. Somebody said salty Sal. He is always salty, but you're one of my favorites, man. So anytime we get to chop it up, I appreciate you.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
Everybody have a great night. I'll be back with Ryan sometime soon. We'll go over everything else that happened the last couple of days with the Bills. Have a great weekend, everybody.